Long ago, when the skies above the North Sea were still wild and the world danced in the shimmering glow of the aurora, there lived a people carved from ice and fire. The Vikings. Wanderers of oceans. Dreamers of distant lands. Children of Odin, Thor, and the ancient gods who whispered in the winds. Let us begin our tale not with a clash of swords, but with a whisper. A soft breath of the northern wind, drifting through the fjords of Norway, curling around the quiet valleys, brushing the icy streams, and gently rustling the thatched rooftops of a tiny village nestled beneath the shadow of the mountains. This village, known as Bjornvik, was hidden away from the eyes of the world. Cradled by stone and snow, it was home to simple folk, farmers, fishermen, weavers of wool, and singers of sagas. Life was not easy, but it was rich in stories, and it was one such story that would change the fate of the North forever. In the quiet home of an elder woman named Astrid, the fire crackled softly. She was a wise matriarch of the village, known not only for her healing herbs and careful hands, but for her voice. Her stories could lull even the most restless children to sleep. And tonight, she had called the village's little ones to her hearth. They gathered around, their breath fogging the cold night air, bundled in furs. The scent of pine and dried herbs filled the room. Outside, the wind hummed, and above, the stars blinked like the eyes of ancient gods. "My dear ones," Astrid whispered, her voice as smooth as still water. "Tonight, I will tell you a tale not written in runes or carved on stones, but carried in the wind, sung by the ravens, and hidden in the dreams of the sea." The children leaned in closer, their eyes wide. "This," she said, "is the story of Eirik Stormborn, the boy who could hear the sea speak." Eirik was born during a thunderstorm unlike any the villagers had seen. As the lightning danced across the fjords and thunder rolled like distant drums of war, his mother labored in silence. When the child was placed in her arms, the winds outside ceased all at once, and a soft mist rolled in from the coast. They said the gods had stilled the storm to listen. As he grew, Eirik was different. While others played with wooden swords or learned to fish, he would sit at the edge of the cliffs, listening to the waves. Not watching. Listening. As if the sea whispered secrets only he could hear. He spoke little. But when he did, his words carried the weight of something old, something ancient. When he turned 12, he wandered into the forest alone and returned days later with a small stone, smooth and black, shaped like a raven's eye. He said it was a gift from the god Odin. Most thought it was a child's fancy, but Astrid knew better. One cold evening, as snow dusted the rooftops and the aurora swayed in the heavens, Eirik approached Astrid's hut. He said he had dreamed of a ship. A great ship of oak and iron, with sails made of silver mist. In the dream, it called to him from across the water. Its name was Skjold, and it waited beyond the horizon. Astrid listened closely. She did not laugh. She saw something in his eyes, something old. A flicker of fate. She gave him a small pouch of herbs, a runestone for protection, and a woven charm made of crow feathers. "You will go far," she told him. "But never forget your name, your breath, and your heart. These are stronger than any sword." And with that, the boy who listened to the sea began his journey. Outside, the wind picked up once more, curling around the village like a forgotten tune. The fire in Astrid's hearth crackled, casting soft shadows on the children's sleepy faces. "Rest now," she whispered, brushing a strand of hair from a child's brow. "For the tale has only just begun. Tomorrow, we shall follow Eirik across the seas, to lands unknown and sagas untold." And with the gentlest sigh, the night wrapped itself around the village like a warm woolen blanket. The northern wind carried the echoes of Astrid's story into the darkness, across the cliffs, and out into the waiting sea. As the dawn kissed the snow-covered peaks and light spilled slowly across the fjords, the village of Bjornvik awoke under a veil of frost. The smoke from hearth fires rose gently into the air, and the distant sound of gulls echoed across the shore. But one boy, Eirik Stormborn, had already left before the sun had fully risen. He moved quietly through the mist, his breath curling in little clouds, the raven-eye stone swinging gently on a leather cord around his neck. Slung over his shoulder was a satchel filled with dried fish, warm furs, and the pouch of herbs Astrid had given him. His bare fingers touched the carved runestone she had pressed into his hand before he left. He had not said goodbye to the others. The sea had called, and he had answered. The cliffs stood like ancient sentinels above the water. Eirik reached the highest edge, where he often sat in silence. But this time, the sea did not speak in whispers. It roared with longing. He could feel it, deep in his bones. And then, through the swirling morning mist, it appeared. At first, it seemed only a trick of the eyes. A shimmer. A ripple in the air. But then the outline grew clearer, a ship, unlike any other. Not moored. Not anchored. Simply waiting. It was carved of dark oak, polished like obsidian, with a dragon-head prow that looked alive. Its sail was pale and glimmered with a silvery hue, even without the sun. There was no crew. Only silence. It was Fjord, the ship of his dream. Eirik stepped forward. His boots crunched against the frost. He did not question. He did not fear. He climbed aboard, and the moment his foot touched the deck, the sail filled with wind. No oars. No hands to guide it. And yet, the ship turned toward the open sea and began to move. He stood at the bow, eyes forward, heart beating slowly. The wind did not chill him. The sea did not sway him. He was at peace, as though this place, this ship, was where he had always belonged. The mountains faded behind him. The village of Jornvik disappeared into the morning haze. And all around him, the ocean stretched like an endless dream. Days passed, or perhaps hours. Time melted in the gentle rhythm of the waves. He saw no land, no birds, only the ever-changing sky and the whisper of the sea. At night, stars spilled across the heavens in dazzling patterns, and the aurora danced like spirits. Eirik slept beneath the sail, wrapped in his fur cloak, lulled by the creak of wood and the sigh of the wind. On the third night, he awoke to a voice. Not loud. Not harsh. But soft and ancient. Storm-born, it said, like wind brushing reeds. You follow the threads of fate. Eirik sat up slowly. The deck was still. The moon shone high, casting pale light on the water. Who's there? He whispered. There was no reply. Only the flapping of the sail and the soft rush of waves. But then he saw it, a glimmering shape on the horizon. A small island, barely more than a rock, crowned with a ring of standing stones. The ship turned without his touch. It approached the island like a memory returning to the mind. As it neared the shore, it slowed and drifted to a gentle halt. Eirik stepped off onto the cold, damp stones. The island was quiet. No birds. No breeze. Only the faint hum of something deep beneath his feet. He walked to the circle of stones. They were massive, each one taller than a man, carved with runes he did not recognize. In the center of the ring stood a single tree, twisted and ancient, with bark like silver and leaves like frost. As he approached, the wind stirred. From behind the tree, a figure emerged. She was cloaked in midnight blue, her hair like flowing snow, and her eyes as pale as moonlight. You have heard the sea, she said gently. Eirik nodded. You are one of the few who listen. He swallowed, unsure what to say. She reached into her cloak and drew out a small wooden box, carved with the same runes as the stones. She handed it to him. This is your seed, she whispered. The first of 3 gifts. It will reveal what is hidden, but only if you are brave enough to see. Eirik opened the box. Inside was a single feather, black, smooth, and warm to the touch. Not from any bird he had ever seen. The feather of Hugin, she said, Odin's raven. It will guide you when the path is dark. As he looked up to ask more, the woman was gone. The island, the stones, the tree, all faded like mist in the morning sun. Eirik stood once more on the deck of Skjoldr. The box and the feather were still in his hands. The sail filled again, and the ship turned toward the unknown. He looked out at the waves, no longer just water and wind, but a map of stories, dreams, and hidden things. The feather in his hand pulsed softly, like a heartbeat. He was not just a boy now. He was a seeker. A child of sagas. A whisper in the legend yet to be told. Fade into soft lull of ocean waves and distant raven calls. The sea stretched endlessly in all directions, painted in hues of pearl and pale blue. The ship's Skjoldr drifted calmly, carried by winds that did not howl, but sighed, gentle and knowing. Eirik stood at the bow, cradling the feather of Hugin in his hand. It gave off a subtle warmth, as though it held the breath of a bird still alive. The sky above shifted into morning, clouds moving like slow ships of their own. Far in the distance, a strange haze appeared on the horizon. It was neither cloud nor storm. It was a fog, thick, silver, and still. The ship moved toward it without pause. Eirik narrowed his eyes. This fog did not roll like a natural mist. It shimmered faintly, as though lit from within. As Skjoldr entered it, the world fell quiet. The sounds of the waves, the wind, even the creak of the wood, vanished. Silence. A deep, complete silence that seemed to listen as much as it concealed. And then, whispers. Faint and feather-soft, like leaves brushing stone. Eirik turned, trying to find their source. But no one was there. No crew. No wind. Just fog and voice. They were not words he knew. They flowed around him like an ancient language, echoing faintly in the corners of his mind. He held the raven feather to his chest. The moment it touched his heart, the fog began to shift. Shapes formed in the mist, tall and ghostly. Islands. Dark silhouettes emerged, covered in strange trees with hanging silver moss and black bark. Skjoldr drifted toward the largest of them. As it neared the shore, the ship gently came to a stop once more, though Eirik never saw an anchor fall or a hand touch the helm. He stepped onto the island. The ground was soft, made of sand and ancient peat. The air was heavy with stillness. No birds. No wind. Only whispers. "Where are you?" he murmured. The trees creaked in response. And then, from between them, a figure stepped forward. It was an old man, bent but strong, with eyes like river stones and a staff carved from bone. He wore a cloak of moss and had braids of white hair tied with sea glass. "You bring the raven's feather," the old man said. His voice echoed strangely, as though it came from many places at once. "You are storm-born." Eirik nodded, uncertain but steady. "You walk the path of Filja," the old man said. "The spirit threads that bind man to fate. Few walk it. Fewer survive it." The boy looked down at the feather. "What must I do?" The old man turned, motioning for him to follow. Together, they moved into the forest of the island, trees leaning in as if listening. The whispers grew louder, but still, no mouth spoke them. "These are the Isles of Whispering Fog," the old man said softly. "Here, the voices of your ancestors echo forever. If you are willing, they may speak to you." They reached a small glade where stones were arranged in a circle, each carved with names in runes so old they had lost their meanings. The man motioned to the center. "Sit. Listen." Eirik obeyed, sitting cross-legged on the mossy ground. The man placed a stone bowl before him and filled it with water from a flask. He added crushed herbs, ash, and a single drop of his own blood. "Look into the water," he said. "And remember what was never yours to forget." Eirik gazed into the bowl. At first, only darkness. Then, images began to swirl. A man with eyes like his, sailing through stormy seas. A woman with braids down to her waist, singing to the stars. A child, lost in snow, carried by wolves to safety. Fires. Feasts. Wars. Tears. Generations of blood and memory. Faces and names he had never known, and yet somehow recognized. He saw a great hall of gold, where ravens circled the roof beams and a throne of ice stood empty. He heard a voice, soft and distant. Eirik, child of storms, the north calls you. He gasped, and the vision vanished. The bowl trembled. The old man nodded solemnly. You carry the memory of many. You are more than just yourself. Eirik stood, heart pounding gently but firmly. What must I do now? The old man stepped closer and placed something cold into his palm. It was a ring, forged of iron and wrapped with twine. At its center was a small symbol, a wolf chasing the sun. This is your second gift, he said. The ring of Ulfri. It marks you as one who seeks not just truth, but harmony. Wear it, and those who see beyond will recognize your path. Eirik slipped the ring onto his finger. It fit perfectly. Go now, the man said. Before the fog forgets you. Eirik returned to the ship. As soon as he stepped aboard, the fog began to lift. Slowly, the sky returned. The sound of water returned. Life returned. He looked back once. The isles were gone. Only open sea remained. He held the feather and the ring, heart full of questions, but mind at peace. The journey was just beginning. And far in the north, beyond stars and snow, something ancient stirred. Fade into low ocean breeze and soft whispers. The sea had changed. Where once it shimmered in silvers and blues, it now stretched dark and still, like obsidian glass. The air grew colder, and a pale mist rolled over the water like a veil, as though the world was holding its breath. Eirik stood at the helm of Skjold, though the ship steered itself. His breath formed little clouds, and the raven's feather hung from his neck, nestled against his chest. The ring of Ulfri hugged his finger tightly, warm despite the growing chill. The horizon soon faded, swallowed by snow. Not falling from the sky, but rising from the sea. Great floating islands of ice, each carved in sharp shapes, drifting like silent giants. Between them, narrow paths wound like silver ribbons. Skjold weaved among them with grace. As the ship passed deeper into the icy maze, Eirik noticed something odd. The icebergs weren't just natural. Their surfaces were engraved, etched with strange runes that shimmered faintly with blue light. Some pulsed softly as he passed, as if acknowledging him. Others glowed brighter as though warning or guiding. Then, ahead, a shape emerged. A flat, massive sheet of ice, still and perfect like a polished mirror. And at its center, a dome of ice rose like a great frozen temple. The ship stopped without a sound. Eirik stepped off the ship, boots crunching against the frozen ground. The silence here was thick, pressing in around him. The dome towered above, and its entrance was carved into a circular arch with ancient symbols spiraling inward like a galaxy of language. He reached out and touched one rune, it pulsed with gentle warmth. As he stepped through the arch, the air changed. The cold no longer bit. Instead, it embraced him. Welcomed him. Inside, the walls shimmered with frozen memory. It wasn't a structure, it was a sanctuary. And within the center stood a single pedestal of carved ice. Resting upon it, embedded halfway into the ice, was a flat, dark stone, a runestone. Eirik approached slowly. Around the stone, glowing script spiraled outward like a snowflake. He could not read it, but he felt it. He reached into his pouch and pulled out Astrid's old runestone, the one she had given him before he left Bjornvik. He held it near the frozen tablet, and suddenly the symbols began to move, slowly, gracefully, rearranging themselves across the surface. The frozen air filled with sound, the soft hum of ancient voices, echoing like wind through mountain halls. Eirik closed his eyes, and the voice of a woman spoke, not aloud, but inside him. Calm and clear. You have reached the Hvelgrind, the gate of ice. Few come here. Fewer understand. He saw in his mind images of ancient Vikings carving runes into glaciers. He saw a boy with a wolf beside him, standing on a cliff as lightning split the sky. He saw a woman spinning threads of silver, her eyes filled with sorrow. You seek your path. You carry the gifts. But still, you do not know who you are. Eirik bowed his head. I want to know, he whispered softly. The ice pulsed beneath his feet. The stone before him cracked, just once, and the center opened like a blooming flower of frost. Resting within was a third item, a small blade, no longer than a hand, carved from obsidian. Its handle wrapped in aged leather, worn by time and touch. It was beautiful, and terribly quiet. The knife of air, the voice said. It does not cut flesh, but destiny. Eirik picked it up with great care. The moment his fingers touched the hilt, a vision struck him, fleeting but vivid. He stood alone, atop a high cliff. Before him, a road of stars stretched into the heavens. Behind him, a world of war, shadow, and sorrow. The knife trembled in his hand. It hummed not with violence, but with purpose. When he opened his eyes again, the voice was gone. The runes faded from the walls. The dome of ice around him shimmered once, then slowly began to melt. It did not collapse. It dissolved like a dream, vanishing into the air, revealing the night sky above, a swirling canvas of stars and northern light. Eirik stood alone in the cold, but he did not feel fear. The ship's Fjord waited silently at the shore of ice. He stepped aboard. The sea welcomed him back like an old friend. The ship turned, gliding smoothly between the floating islands. In his satchel now rested the third gift. The raven feather for guidance. The ring of Ulfri for recognition. And the knife of air, for choices yet to be made. He sat at the bow, gazing into the dark waters, listening to the sea's lullaby. It sang to him, not with words, but with the sound of movement, of drifting stars, of distant wolves howling on forgotten hills. The wind brushed his cheek like the touch of a mother's hand. The journey ahead was still unknown, but Eirik no longer feared it. He was no longer just a boy who heard whispers. He was part of the saga now. A thread in the great tapestry of the north. Fade to gentle, icy wind, the sound of waves beneath snow. Night had fallen across the northern sea. But it was not a night of darkness. Above Eirik's ship, the stars glimmered in such vast, delicate patterns that the sky seemed stitched by hand. The aurora whispered across the heavens, soft and slow, like a veil made of green silk dancing in the breath of the gods. The ship's Fjord drifted steadily, the ocean calm and endless. Eirik sat at the prow, eyes turned to the sky. The gifts he had gathered, the feather, the ring, and the obsidian blade, rested safely by his side. As the stars wheeled above him, one shimmered brighter than the rest. It pulsed slowly, rhythmically, as though it breathed. Eirik leaned forward, watching closely. Then, movement. A trail of starlight formed in the sky. Not falling stars, but rising ones. A road. A glittering bridge of light stretching from the sea into the sky. The ship turned toward it. Eirik blinked, unsure whether he was awake or dreaming. But the feather on his chest warmed gently, confirming that this was no illusion. The ship rose. Not abruptly, not in shock, but slowly, gently, like driftwood caught in a rising tide. The waters below glowed silver, and the ship climbed them like a winding staircase into the stars. He stood, watching as the earth fell away. No longer waves. No longer fog. Only a sea of stars surrounding him. The wind no longer carried salt, but stardust. The silence was vast but comforting. The star road had accepted him. For a long time, he stood there, lost in awe. The path stretched ahead, endless and quiet. Each star a memory. Each shimmer a story. Then he saw it, far in the distance, hovering above the horizon of the cosmos, a great hall, suspended in the stars. It was not made of wood or stone, but of light. Its roof shimmered with the color of the aurora. Its pillars were carved from moonbeams. And its gates were open, wide and welcoming. Skjold approached, and as it drew close, the ship gently slowed and settled onto a long crystal dock that hovered in the air. Eirik stepped off, heart steady. Before the gates stood a single figure. He was tall and cloaked in robes of shifting silver. His beard flowed like clouds in the wind, and in his hand was a staff topped with a glowing stone. His eyes held the weight of time, and yet his face was calm, like a father waiting for a long-lost child. Eirik Stormborn, the figure said, with a voice as quiet as falling snow. You have crossed fog, ice, and shadow. You have gathered the signs. Now, you must listen. The boy bowed his head respectfully. Who are you? I am the keeper of the Sky Hall, the man replied. I guard the Bridge of Dreams, and I am the last before truth. He turned and walked slowly into the hall. Eirik followed. Inside, the walls shimmered with visions, echoes of lives not yet lived. He saw himself standing beside warriors. He saw flames and peace. Wolves and kings. Love and loneliness. The future, fragmented and floating. At the center of the hall stood a round pool of light. The keeper motioned toward it. This is the pool of threads, he said. Here, all paths are visible. All fates, all choices, all truths. Eirik stepped forward and looked into the light. What he saw was not a single future, but many. He saw himself turning back, returning home to a quiet life. He saw himself lost in distant lands, forging peace between clans. He saw battle. He saw silence. He saw a forest where he sat beneath a tree, old and smiling. Each vision faded into another like ripples on water. There is no single path, the keeper said gently. Only the one you walk. Eirik looked up. I don't want to be a hero, he whispered. I only want to understand why I was called. The keeper nodded slowly. You were called because you listen. He reached into his robe and handed Eirik a fourth item, a single braid of silver hair, bound with a star-shaped clasp. The final gift, he said. The braid of Varda. It holds no power, no magic. Only memory. It belonged to the first dreamer, the first who walked this road before you. Eirik held the braid carefully. It felt light, like wind itself. The keeper looked at him once more. You are ready to return, he said. Not as a seeker, but as a weaver. Eirik stepped back toward the ship. The hall slowly faded behind him, its light lingering only in memory. Skjold returned gently, beginning its descent. The stars fell behind. The sea rose to meet him. The ship glided down the star road like a leaf upon still water. Eirik sat once more at the bow. He no longer feared the unknown. He was not searching for answers. He was carrying the story forward. The story of a boy who listened to the sea, spoke with the fog, remembered through ice, and touched the sky. And beneath the stars, the waves sang softly in time with his heartbeat. Fade into slow, dreamy tones of ocean and distant wind chimes. The sea had grown gentle again. After the long journey through the stars, the ship Skjold drifted now through a narrow fjord, flanked on both sides by tall cliffs draped in moss and mist. Waterfalls tumbled down like long white ribbons, their sounds barely louder than a sigh. Eirik sat quietly at the front of the ship, the fourth gift, the braid of Varda, resting near his heart. It fluttered slightly with every breath he took, as though it, too, was alive. The cliffs closed in as the ship moved deeper, narrowing the path until only a sliver of sky remained above. It was here, in this quiet space between land and sea, that Eirik heard it. A song. Faint. Melancholy. Beautiful beyond words. No instrument played it. No voice sang it. It came not from the air, but from the stone, a vibration that shimmered in his bones, like the memory of music long forgotten. The ship slowed. At the very heart of the fjord, the cliffs opened suddenly into a wide valley. A green basin of calm waters, tall birch trees, and wildflowers swaying in windless air. It was as if the land itself was dreaming. The valley was silent, except for the song. It hovered everywhere, soft and ghost-like. Eirik stepped off the ship and onto the mossy shore. The moment his foot touched the earth, the music grew just a little clearer. Not louder, just closer. He followed the sound, walking deeper into the valley. Around him, the trees seemed to sway in time with the rhythm. Petals floated down like snow. And then he saw them. Stones. Tall standing stones in a circle, much like the ones on the Whispering Isles. But these were smooth and blank, no runes, no carvings. Eirik stepped into the circle. The moment he did, the music stopped. Silence. And then, a voice. Soft. Distant. Like it came from within the stones themselves. Why do you walk with the wind, child of storms? Eirik bowed his head. I seek to understand the voices, he said gently. The whispers, the signs, the gifts. You carry the feather of the raven, the voice said. Yes. The ring of harmony. The blade of fate. The braid of memory. Yes, he whispered. There was a long pause. Then the voice asked, but do you carry yourself? Eirik blinked. He looked down at his hands, his boots, the leather cord around his neck. He looked at the gifts. And he understood. I carry their power, he said quietly. But I must choose who I am. The voice responded with a tone like the rustling of leaves, then listen now, and remember the song. The air shifted. One by one, the standing stones began to hum. Each emitted a single tone, long and low, soft and pure. Together, they formed a melody. The song of the valley. A song that had always been there, but could only be heard by those who listened with their whole soul. Eirik closed his eyes. He heard laughter. The voice of his mother calling him in from the rain. Astrid stories by firelight. The waves beneath Skjoldr. The howl of wind over ice. The hum of the runes beneath his fingertips. And the silence between each heartbeat. The song was not of one thing. It was of everything. When he opened his eyes, the stones had changed. Each now bore a single rune, faint, glowing, and familiar. The first was for courage. The second for listening. The third for choice. The fourth for memory. And the fifth, for Eirik. His own name, written in light. The valley was no longer silent. It sang softly, with him and for him. Eirik placed his hand upon the stone bearing his name. It pulsed gently. A warmth spread from his fingers through his chest, his limbs, and his heart. The valley whispered once more. You are no longer a seeker. You are a keeper. Eirik stood taller. He turned, and Skjoldr was waiting still, floating quietly in the silver light of a sun hidden behind clouds. He stepped aboard. The ship turned without a word and began to drift once more. As it sailed from the valley, the song faded, but not completely. It stayed with him. Inside him. And he understood now that the sea, the wind, the stars, the runes, and even silence, were all part of the same story. His story. A story still being written. fade to soft hums and echoing tones, like distant music on water. The ship's Fjord moved quietly once again, gliding along a sea that now shimmered with silver moonlight. The sky above had darkened into a deep navy blue, scattered with stars like scattered grains of salt. The moon hung full and round in the sky, casting pale light on the waves. It looked close tonight, closer than it should have. As if it were watching. Eirik leaned against the wooden side of the ship, the memory of the valley's song still humming gently in his ears. He felt calm, but alert. The night air was cool and sharp, smelling faintly of pine and distant snow. Far in the distance, he saw land, dark and still. A low coastline, rimmed with tall trees and shrouded in the soft mist of night. The ship drifted toward it, slow and smooth. As Skjoldr touched the shore, Eirik stepped off and into the soft sand. The moon cast shadows from the trees, long and strange, like fingers reaching. The air was silent. Not the silence of peace, but the stillness that comes just before something important. He walked slowly inland, following a narrow path that wound into a thick pine forest. The trees were tall and ancient, their bark dark and rough. Not even the wind stirred their branches. Then, he heard it. A howl. Low, long, and deep. Not threatening. Not wild. Lonely. Eirik stood still. His heart beat slowly, steadily. A second howl echoed from farther away. Then another. And then, from the shadow of the trees, a figure emerged. A wolf. Massive. Gray. Eyes glowing with a soft golden light. It walked toward him slowly, not snarling, not aggressive. It moved with purpose, with calm. As it drew closer, Eirik noticed something strange. Around the wolf's neck was a simple iron collar, carved with ancient runes. The wolf stopped just a few paces away and sat. It tilted its head, studying him. And then, it spoke. Not with a mouth. Not with sound. But inside his mind. Eirik Stormborn, came the voice. Deep, like wind in the mountains. You carry the ring. Eirik touched the ring of Ulfri. Yes, he said quietly. I was given it to find peace, to walk the path between paths. The wolf nodded slowly. I am Fenna, it said. One of the last of the rune guardians. Bound to the forest. Keeper of the moon. Eirik stepped closer, unafraid. Why have I come here? The wolf's eyes glowed brighter. To meet yourself, it said simply. And then, the trees began to part. As if pushed by unseen hands, they opened a path that led to a wide clearing. In the center was a pool of perfectly still water, glowing slightly with the light of the moon. Step into the pool, the wolf said, standing beside him. Eirik obeyed. He stepped into the water, which was cool but not cold. It barely rippled as he moved, and soon he stood waist deep, the moon reflected perfectly around him. The wolf watched from the shore. Then, from the water, came a figure. Not a shadow. Not a dream. It was him. Another Eirik. Same face. Same eyes. But older. Stronger. Wiser. And the older Eirik spoke. You are not here to become someone else, he said softly. You are here to remember that you have always been enough. The water shimmered. The younger Eirik reached out, and the vision faded into mist. He was alone again, standing in the pool, moonlight surrounding him like a cocoon. He stepped out, dripping softly, breath calm. The wolf waited. You faced the mirror, Fenna said. You did not flinch. Eirik nodded. I saw what I could become. What I might already be. Fenna turned and began to walk back into the woods. Eirik followed. As they walked, the forest began to shift, brighter, gentler. Moonlight now danced through the leaves. The silence no longer felt heavy. It felt sacred. At the edge of the forest, the wolf stopped. It turned back to him and bowed its great head. "This is your next gift," it said. "Not an object, but a knowing. The wolf walks alone, but never forgets the pack." Eirik understood. He reached out and gently rested his hand on the wolf's brow. The fur was thick, warm, and comforting. "Thank you," he whispered. The wolf stepped back into the shadows. And was gone. The ship's Fjord waited at the shore. Eirik climbed aboard, and as the ship pulled gently away, he looked back one last time at the forest bathed in moonlight. Somewhere, far away, a howl echoed once more. But this time, it was not lonely. It was strong. It was proud. It was part of him. Fade into night winds and a distant, calm wolf howl. As Skjoldr sailed onward through calm waters, Eirik noticed how the sea had darkened, not with storm, but with depth. It was the color of ink, still and reflective, mirroring the sky above like a twin. The stars sparkled in both directions, making it feel as if the ship floated between two worlds, above and below. The moon now sat lower in the sky, like a gentle guide showing the way. Eirik stood at the bow, his heart quiet. The wolf's wisdom still lingered in his thoughts. His ring glowed softly, and the braid of memory moved gently in the breeze. All was calm. Then, ahead, a shadow appeared. Not on the horizon, but below the surface. A shape under the water, vast and slow, like a sleeping leviathan. The ship passed above it. Eirik leaned over the edge, watching as the shape drifted beneath the hull. But it did not rise. It did not move. It was still. A whisper echoed in his mind. "Beneath all dreams, there are roots." Soon after, the ship drifted toward a small, rocky island. It was barely more than a knuckle of stone in the sea. But on its face, hidden beneath vines and moss, was an opening, a dark mouth carved into the rock. A cave. Skjoldr gently nudged the edge of the stone, stopping as if it knew Eirik must go alone. He stepped onto the stone, the surface smooth beneath his feet. A gentle hush surrounded him. No birds. No waves. Only the distant heartbeat of the sea. The entrance to the cave beckoned. He took a deep breath, touched the feather at his chest, and entered. The light faded almost instantly. Darkness enveloped him, soft and warm like velvet. But it was not empty. It was alive. The darkness whispered, not with fear, but with welcome. He moved forward slowly, guided only by touch and intuition. And then, light. Faint at first. Then brighter. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber beneath the earth. The ceiling shimmered with glowing crystals like fallen stars. Pools of still water reflected the light, and soft moss blanketed the ground. In the center of the chamber sat a stone throne, overgrown with ivy and age. And upon it, a figure. Not a person. Not quite. It was a being made of shadow and light, shaped like a woman cloaked in midnight. Her face was hidden, but her presence was peaceful. "You have come far," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Eirik bowed his head. "Where am I?" he asked softly. "The cave of waking dreams," she replied. "Where truth comes not from the eyes, but from the soul." She raised a hand and pointed toward one of the pools. "Look." He stepped forward and knelt beside the water. In its depths, he saw not a reflection, but memories. He saw himself as a boy, alone on the cliffs, listening to the waves. He saw the day he first touched the raven feather. He saw the ice, the fog, the stars. Then the images shifted. He saw a young girl in a distant land, holding a carved amulet and whispering to the night sky. He saw a warrior laying down his sword and building a garden. He saw a traveler lighting lanterns for those who could no longer find their way. He turned to the figure. "Who are they?" "They are the others who walk the path," she said. Different faces. Different names. But the same song. Eirik nodded slowly. They're like me. Yes, she whispered. You are not alone. She then opened her hands. A fifth gift. A candle. Small, made of beeswax, wrapped in thin silver thread. The flame was already lit, but it did not burn or flicker. This is your light, she said. It will not reveal the future. It will not chase away all shadows. But it will stay with you when all other lights fade. Eirik accepted the candle with great care. It felt warm, not in heat, but in presence. Thank you, he whispered. Go now, she said gently. And remember, dreams are not only for sleep. They are the roots of your waking life. Eirik stepped away, and the cave began to fade. Not collapse. Not vanish. But fade, like mist lifting from the ground. He found himself back at the edge of the stone island. Skjoldr waited still. He stepped aboard. The sea welcomed him once more. The ship drifted away from the cave, the candle in his hand glowing softly, unflickering, a silent companion. Above, the stars continued their quiet dance. And below, in the deep dark waters, the great shape still slept, calm, ancient, and undisturbed. Eirik sat down and closed his eyes, listening once more. The sea breathed. The ship creaked gently. And inside him, the light burned steady. Fade into gentle cave echoes, soft flickering flame sounds, and distant waves. The sea had calmed so much that it hardly moved. The ship's Skjoldr floated like a feather atop a mirror. There were no winds now, only the faint sound of water lapping gently against the hull. Eirik sat cross-legged on the deck, the candle from the cave resting beside him. Though its flame gave no heat, it warmed the space around it, like an invisible circle of peace. The sky had turned a pale lavender with streaks of soft gold. Dawn was approaching, though slowly, as if time had grown sleepy. In the distance, a landmass emerged, low, round, and green. It looked like a hill rising from the sea, covered in ancient forest. The trees grew thick and tall, their branches tangled like arms in deep slumber. As Skjoldr approached the shore, Eirik noticed something unusual. The island did not sound alive. No birds sang. No wind stirred. Even the insects were silent. It was as if the entire place was sleeping. The ship touched land with a gentle thud. Eirik stepped off into soft moss. There was no sand, only layers of dark green velvet that covered the forest floor. The trees around him were enormous, thicker than 5 men across, their trunks twisted with age and wisdom. Their leaves shimmered faintly, as though kissed by dreamlight. Eirik took a few steps forward. Still silence. Then, he noticed something strange at the base of each tree, small carved runes etched into the bark, glowing faintly with golden light. Each rune was different. Some looked like stars. Others like waves, or spirals, or animal shapes. As he walked deeper, he felt a pressure, not heavy, but present. Like entering a sacred space, a place where words were not needed. Then came the voice. Not spoken aloud, but felt in the chest. You walk among the ancients. Eirik turned. A figure stood before him, not a person, but a spirit, tall, robed in leaves and bark, its face hidden behind a mask made of wood. Its eyes glowed with forest green light. I am Gardr, it said, keeper of the sleeping trees. Eirik bowed his head in respect. Why are they sleeping? They sleep to dream the world into balance, Gardr said softly. Each tree holds a memory of the past and a hope for the future. Eirik placed a hand on one of the trunks. It felt warm, alive. The runes pulsed. You have brought the candle, Gardr continued. You may pass into their dreams. Eirik's heart slowed. He sat beneath one of the largest trees and placed the candle before him. Its steady flame reflected in the eyes of the forest. And slowly, gently, he closed his eyes. Soft inhalation, gentle exhalation. The forest faded from his sight. And in its place, a new world. A dream. He stood in a meadow filled with golden light. Flowers as tall as a man waved gently in the breeze. A soft melody filled the air, like a lullaby made of wind and water. Figures walked past him, Vikings from ages long gone, not in war, but in peace. They planted seeds. They carved stories into stone. They held children and sang songs to the sky. He saw his mother's face, laughing beside a fire. He saw a child running barefoot through snow, chasing a raven. He saw stars falling like rain into the sea. And then, he saw himself. Older. Wiser. Sitting beneath a tree, surrounded by others. Not as a warrior. But as a storyteller. The dream faded gently, leaving only a calm stillness behind. Eirik opened his eyes. The candle still burned. The tree before him glowed more brightly now. The runes on its bark had changed, one of them now looked like a sleeping eye, gently closed. Gardr stepped forward. "You have given your dream to the forest," he said. "And in return, it gives you peace." Eirik rose slowly, a calm smile on his lips. "What is the next gift?" he asked softly. Gardr opened a hand. A branch. Small. Twisted. Covered in soft green moss. "This is the sixth gift," the spirit whispered. "The branch of rest. Wherever you plant it, sleep will come easily, and no nightmares may pass." Eirik accepted the branch with deep reverence, cradling it gently. Gardr bowed. And as Eirik turned to leave, the trees around him began to stir, just slightly. A soft rustle like the sound of 1,000 deep breaths. Not awake. But aware. As he stepped back onto Skjold, the ship moved forward once more, as if guided by invisible hands. The candle beside him still burned. The branch lay across his lap. And the forest behind him stood still, dreaming beneath the soft sky. Fade into distant whine through leaves, soft breathing sounds, and flickering candlelight. The sea stretched out endlessly once more, calm and silent, with the trees of the sleeping island far behind. Eirik sat quietly on the deck of Skjold, the sixth gift, a moss-covered branch, resting beside the candle. Together they glowed softly, casting no shadows, only warmth. The sky above had turned to twilight, that sacred in-between time where the stars begin to blink awake and the sun whispers its last golden thoughts. The world felt suspended in stillness. The ship moved gently, following no wind and no oars, guided by something deeper. Eirik closed his eyes and listened. The ship creaked softly. The sea whispered below. And then, a strange sound. Not a voice. Not an animal. But a ripple. Like a single drop falling into a still pond, but in the air. He opened his eyes and gasped. Before him stretched a lake, not of water, but of sky. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. A vast, circular stretch of ocean that perfectly reflected the heavens above. Stars shone in the sea, clouds drifted just beneath the surface, and moons floated on water like silver stones. The mirror of the sky. Eirik understood the name without needing to be told. As Skjold approached the mirror lake, it stopped. It would not cross. Eirik knew, this part of the journey must be made alone. He stepped from the deck onto a small piece of driftwood, as smooth as polished stone, and it began to glide silently across the mirrored surface. No wind. No paddling. Only stillness. Around him, the sky reflected perfectly in every direction. Above. Below. All around. He was floating through a dream of the cosmos. And then. A voice, his own. But younger. More uncertain. Who are you? He turned, and saw himself. Not in a mirror. But standing across the sky, facing him. It was a younger Eirik, perhaps 10 years old. His eyes were wide, his hands were clenched, his feet bare on the mirrored sea. I am you, the younger voice said. Eirik stepped closer. But why are you here? He asked softly. The boy looked up at him. To remind you. Of what? The boy pointed down. Eirik looked. And beneath the mirror, he saw it all. His doubts. His fears. His anger. His loneliness. His failures. They floated beneath the surface like drifting leaves. He didn't look away. Instead, he knelt. And placed a hand against the water. The mirror rippled gently. And the younger Eirik walked forward, placing his hand over the older one's. The moment they touched, light burst upward, not blinding, but soft, like the shimmer of moonlight on snow. And when it faded, the child was gone. But something remained in Eirik's hand. A crystal. Small, round, and clear as water, pulsing gently with pale blue light. The seventh gift. The tear of the sky, a voice whispered from nowhere and everywhere. It holds the truth of who you were, and who you still are. Eirik closed his fingers around it. Warmth flowed through his chest. Not power. Not pride. But peace. Deep, steady peace. The kind that comes not from victory, but from acceptance. The driftwood turned and glided back towards Skjoldr. As he stepped aboard once more, the ship began to move forward again. Eirik turned to look behind him one last time. The mirror lake had vanished. Only sea remained. But the sky seemed closer now. And in his palm, the tear of the sky glowed softly. The candle still burned beside him. The branch lay still and content. And now, with the seventh gift, Eirik felt whole in a way he hadn't known he was missing. He leaned back, arms behind his head, staring into the stars above. They seemed to wink at him. As if saying, "You are seen. You are known. You are loved." Fade into slow ambient shimmer, soft lapping waves, and distant stars twinkling in rhythm. It hummed now, softly, like a lullaby being sung just beneath the waves. The kind of sound that stirred memories not of things lived, but things dreamed. The kind of music that called not to the ears, but to the heart. Eirik rested his hand over the pouch containing the tear of the sky. The crystal still pulsed gently, like a quiet heartbeat. The candle glowed as it always had. And the mossy branch slept like a curled cat beside it. But now, something new stirred in the air. A scent. Salt, and flowers. And then, a voice. Not loud. Not near. Not even entirely outside of him. But everywhere. Soft. Gentle. Sad. It sang in a language older than the runes. A melody woven with longing. The ship's Skjoldr turned gently on its own. Toward the source. Far ahead, a small island rose from the sea. Not grand like the forested one before, but delicate. Almost like a shell lying on the ocean's surface. White sand. Low grasses. A single tree with branches that dipped into the waves. And beneath it. A figure. A woman. Hair like wet silver thread, skin pale and moonlit, eyes dark as the sea at night. She was singing. She did not look up, even as the ship approached. Her voice wove through the mist like silk, trailing in every direction. Eirik stepped off Skjoldr, onto sand so soft it sighed beneath his feet. He walked slowly, reverently, as if afraid to wake something ancient. She looked up. The song stopped. The silence after her voice was so deep, it felt holy. "You've come," she said softly. "I have," Eirik replied, bowing slightly. The woman smiled, not with lips, but with presence. Like a tide that had pulled back just for him. "Do you know who I am?" she asked. Eirik hesitated. Then spoke. "You are the sea wife." She nodded. "The one who was left behind," she whispered. "The one whose stories were never written in the sagas." He stepped closer. She looked both ancient and young, timeless, like the ocean itself. "I am every mother who watched her child sail away. Every lover who waited on the shore. Every daughter whose song was lost in the wind." Her voice held no bitterness. Only longing. Eirik knelt before her. "I hear you now." She reached out, and in her hand was a shell. Simple. Small. Pink, like a sunset held in a spiral. She placed it in his hand. "This is the 8th gift," she said. "The shell of remembering." He turned it over gently in his palm. "When you hold it to your ear," she said, "you won't hear the sea. You'll hear what you've forgotten. And what others wish you'd remember." Eirik pressed it softly to his ear. And he heard. Laughter. His father's voice, reading him stories. The hum of his mother's lullabies. A promise made to a childhood friend. A name spoken in kindness. The silence of forgiveness. He removed the shell. Tears shimmered in his eyes, though none fell. The sea wife looked at him. "Stories live longer than breath," she said. "But only if they are carried with care." He placed the shell into his satchel, alongside the crystal. "Will I hear your song again?" he asked gently. She tilted her head. "Perhaps. When the sea is very still, and your heart is very open." She stood. Walked slowly into the water. With each step, her body shimmered until it dissolved into foam. Only the tree remained behind her, its roots deep in the sea, its branches touching the stars. Eirik stood alone, the candle still glowing on the sand beside him. He returned to Skjold. As the ship moved forward again, the song echoed once more, far away now. Like a memory of a dream. The 8th gift nestled against the others. And Eirik sat quietly, letting the sea carry him forward. He did not rush. He did not speak. He simply listened. And the sea wife's melody followed him into the dusk. Fade into soft ocean waves, distant female humming, and the sound of a shell held close to the ear. Eirik awoke from a gentle nap, unsure when he had drifted off. The candle still glowed beside him, its quiet flame untouched by time or wind. The sea rocked Skjold gently, like a cradle on the waves. But the sky had changed. The soft hues of twilight were gone. Now, clouds circled above, dark, not with thunder, but with thought. They didn't roar or flash, yet they swirled with quiet intensity, as if brooding. There was no wind. No rain. Just stillness. The kind that makes the hair on your arms rise. Eirik stood slowly. The sea ahead had darkened, yet remained smooth. Not a wave disturbed its glassy surface. And then, the storm arrived. Not with lightning or sound. But with silence. A sudden, pressing, absolute silence. Not even the sea whispered now. No birds. No breeze. Just a deep, unnatural hush. The ship stopped moving. Eirik looked upward, and saw eyes. Dozens of them. Circling within the clouds, each one slowly blinking. Enormous. Calm. Watching. He did not feel afraid. Only exposed. As though his soul were laid bare. A voice entered his mind. Not thunderous. But low, steady, and ancient. You carry the gifts. Eirik nodded. Yes. You carry the flame, the feather, the whisper, the stone, the branch, the tear, the shell. I do. Then you must carry this as well. The clouds parted, just slightly, and from the sky, a single object descended, slowly, softly, like a snowflake. A mask. Carved from obsidian, smooth and silent. Its eyes were closed, its mouth peaceful. It hovered before Eirik, waiting. He reached out, and as his fingers brushed the mask, time seemed to still completely. And he was elsewhere. A field of snow. He stood alone. No gifts. No sky. No ship. Only silence. And then, voices. From within. Each one, a thought. Some kind. Some harsh. Memories. Doubts. Fears. He turned, and saw himself, again. Not as a child. Not even as a man. But as a presence. Neither warrior nor wanderer. Just, being. The mask was in his hand again. And now, he understood. It was not a disguise. It was protection, from the voices that rose too loudly inside. It was stillness. The ninth gift. The mask of quiet, came the voice from the sky once more. Wear it when the noise of the world becomes too much. It will bring you silence. Not emptiness, but peace. Eirik placed the mask into his satchel, beside the others. As he did, the eyes in the sky blinked, once, slowly, and then began to fade. The clouds uncurled like drifting fog. The silence lifted. A single breeze kissed his cheek. And Skjoldr began to move again. The storm had never raged. Yet it had passed. Eirik looked up one last time. And whispered. "Thank you." No answer came. Only a soft hush, as if the sea itself were exhaling. He sat once more beside the candle. Its light flickered gently, unbothered by storms or silence. And Skjoldr sailed onward, steady and calm. Behind him, the storm faded into memory. Ahead, the stars returned, blinking softly in approval. Fade into a low wind hum, gentle heartbeat sounds, and the crackling silence of thought. The stars were sharp tonight. Not harsh or cold, but clear. As if they had leaned in closer to watch Eirik's voyage, curious about this quiet traveler and the glowing candle that never went out. Skjoldr glided forward, smooth and sure, the sea around it like polished stone. Eirik sat cross-legged now, the satchel of gifts resting beside him. The obsidian mask, the whispering shell, the feather, the tear of the sky, they all rested peacefully, humming like a lullaby only he could hear. Then he saw it. A strange shape on the horizon. Low. Round. Still. An island, but unlike any he had seen. No cliffs. No trees. Just a perfect, smooth mound, like a sleeping ear rising from the sea. As Skjoldr approached, the ship slowed of its own will. The candle's flame dimmed, not from fear, but in reverence. Eirik stepped off the ship and found the island to be soft, its surface velvety and springy underfoot. Moss? Not quite. More like silence given shape. He stood in the center and waited. And then. He heard it. Not a sound. But a listening. A presence. The island was not speaking. It was hearing. Every step he took, it listened. Every breath, it noticed. And then, gently, it echoed back. Not in words, but in memory. He heard his own voice, laughing as a child. The sound of his footfalls as he had run through the snowfields of home. The quiet weeping of the night he had left his village. Even the hush of his dreams as he slept on the ship. All of it. The island had listened to everything. He knelt. Closed his eyes. And let the silence swell. And then a question rose, not from the island, but from within. Do you hear yourself? Eirik opened his eyes. He did. For the first time in many moons, he wasn't just remembering his story. He was present in it. Fully. Completely. The island, as if satisfied, began to hum softly. Not with sound. But with feeling. And from the ground before him, a small stone emerged. Smooth. Ear-shaped. Pale silver. The 10th gift. The stone of listening. When placed against the heart, it let one hear not just words, but intentions. Not just stories, but truths. Even those left unspoken. Eirik lifted it, holding it against his chest. And the island pulsed warmly beneath his feet. Not with power. But with connection. He rose and bowed gently. "Thank you," he whispered. The island rippled softly beneath him, as if bowing in return. Back on Skjold, the candle brightened. The ship turned gently, leaving the island behind. And still, the feeling of being heard lingered in his chest. The kind of silence that wasn't empty. But full. Fade into soft heartbeat echoes, the distant rustle of moss, and the sound of breath meeting stillness. The sea grew warmer once more. Not in temperature, but in tone. Gentle ripples spread like yawns across the glassy surface. The stars shimmered above like tiny, blinking thoughts in the night sky. And Skjoldr, ever faithful, glided quietly onward. Eirik rested with one hand on the satchel. Inside it, 10 gifts now lay nestled, each one humming with its own quiet truth. The obsidian mask, the listening stone, the feather of the first dream, the shell of remembering. All of them held a story. A piece of something deeper. The flame of the candle flickered gently in time with the motion of the sea. Then, land. Not large. But tall. A single tree rose from the sea ahead. It grew from a small mound of earth no bigger than a cottage, surrounded by still water. The tree was massive, its bark silver gray, its leaves soft green, glowing faintly like tiny lanterns. It looked ancient. Older than songs. Older than names. Skjoldr slowed as it reached the island, then stopped with a gentle sigh of wood on water. Eirik stepped off the ship, his boots touching soft moss. The tree pulsed with memory. He felt it before he even reached it. As he stepped closer, the tree shimmered, not in light, but in emotion. The bark moved like skin remembering a caress. The roots quivered like limbs waking from slumber. Then, it spoke. Not aloud. But in feeling. A memory rose before him. His mother, singing to him beneath a tree just like this one. His father, whittling a wooden horse while telling tales of gods and giants. The wind on his cheeks during his first voyage. The feeling of his fingers brushing across ancient runes carved into stone. All of it returned. The tree held memory like the sea held salt. He placed a hand gently on the bark. And the tree gave him a gift. A single leaf, translucent, trembling slightly, yet warm in his hand. As it touched his skin, he saw others. Faces. Places. Times he had never lived. A child hiding from a storm in the roots of a tree. A woman laughing as she carved runes into the bark. A man kneeling in grief, pressing his forehead against the trunk. The tree had watched it all. It remembered everything. The 11th gift. The leaf of echoes. Eirik held it close. This leaf, the tree told him without words, could help one remember not just their own past, but the emotions of those who came before. It was a gift of compassion. Of understanding. A memory that did not belong to him, but could be shared through him. He placed it gently into the satchel. And whispered. "I'll carry your stories." The tree shimmered again. A soft breeze rustled through its glowing leaves. One by one, they sang, so faintly, so sweetly, that it felt like being wrapped in an old, beloved lullaby. He bowed, deeply. and returned to Skjoldr. The ship moved quietly once more. Behind him, the memory tree stood tall, a beacon of remembrance for those who cared enough to pause and listen. As the tree faded into the horizon, Eirik felt its presence settle softly in his heart. Not loud. Not proud. Just, there. Like a familiar dream you don't want to wake from. Fade into soft tree creaks, wind weaving through leaves, and a distant lullaby hum. The sea was quieter now. As if it too had grown tired from holding so many secrets. Skjoldr drifted slowly, its wooden hull sighing softly with every rise and fall of the tide. The candle, still burning beside Eirik, cast a golden glow over the satchel resting near his feet. 11 gifts now. Each one a story. Each one a part of the puzzle. Eirik closed his eyes briefly, and then opened them to a strange sound. A pulse. Not of the heart. But of water. A deep, rhythmic thrum rising from beneath the sea, as if the ocean itself were dreaming. And then he saw it, a glow in the water. Beneath the surface, a blue light shimmered like moonlight wrapped in silk. Skjoldr slowed. Then stopped. Without fear, Eirik leaned over the edge and peered into the depths. There, an opening. A mouth beneath the sea. A cave. Without hesitation, he reached for the candle. Its flame did not flicker. It only glowed brighter, as if eager. And so, he stepped from the boat and into the water. It did not resist him. It parted gently. Welcoming. Guiding. The deeper he went, the quieter the world became. Until at last, he stood on solid stone, within the heart of the cave. There was no roof, only shimmering water above, as if he stood beneath a glass sea. The walls pulsed with soft light. Blues. Greens. Golds. And the sound, the gentle heartbeat of the ocean, surrounded him. Then, he heard breathing. Slow. Calm. Ancient. He turned. And there, curled in the center of the cave, was a creature. Not beast. Not man. But something, older. Its body was shaped of coral and foam. Its eyes were closed. Its chest rose and fell slowly. Sleeping. It did not wake as Eirik stepped closer. Instead, it spoke in his mind. You've brought memory. Song. Silence. Sight. Yes, Eirik whispered. You've come far. He nodded. But do you know how to wait? Eirik hesitated. In all his journey, he had followed signs, stars, whispers. But he had never simply stopped. So he sat. And waited. The candle sat beside him. It did not flicker. Only glowed. And time passed. Moments. Hours. Eternities. Then, the creature opened one eye. And from its body, a small pearl rolled forward. Smooth. Gray. Dull at first, but warm. Eirik picked it up. It pulsed gently in his hand. The 12th gift, the voice said. The pearl of patience. It taught no lesson, spoke no words. But it calmed him. Slowed his breath. Silenced the chatter of his thoughts. Not emptiness, but stillness. Real stillness. He bowed to the creature. It smiled with closed eyes, and resumed its sleep. Eirik turned. The path to the sea opened once more. And when he surfaced, the stars greeted him like old friends. Skjoldr waited, faithful as ever. He climbed aboard. And the candle flame welcomed him home. The 12th gift nestled in the satchel, glowing faintly. A quiet reminder that sometimes, doing nothing is the bravest thing of all. Fade into deep water hums, the pulse of waves, and the distant breath of a dreaming sea. The sky above was cloudless now. Clear, wide, and open. The stars hung gently, like lanterns tied to the fabric of the night. And the moon, soft and full, cast silver light upon the sea. Eirik stood quietly aboard Skjoldr, hands resting on the edge of the ship. The gifts in the satchel beside him murmured faintly, like sleeping voices sharing their dreams. 12 gifts. Each one alive with meaning. And ahead, something strange. A tall shape on the horizon. Not a tree. Not a tower. A lighthouse. But no light shone from it. Only shadow. The structure stood on a small rocky island, old and weather-worn. Its stones were smoothed by time and wind. Moss grew between cracks. Yet the top, where a flame should burn, remained dark. And as Skjoldr approached, Eirik felt something unexpected. Loneliness. Not his own. But the tower's. He stepped ashore. And the wind met him. Not cold. Not sharp. Just, empty. The door to the lighthouse stood open. He stepped inside. No stair. No ladder. Just a wide spiral path, winding upward through stone and silence. With each step, he felt memories in the walls. Once, this lighthouse had burned. It had guided ships. Welcomed wanderers. Held hope like fire in a frozen world. But now, it waited. At the top, he stood where the flame once lived. And there, in the center of the floor, sat a mirror. Round. Simple. Still. He knelt before it. And saw himself. But not just his reflection. He saw every version of himself from his journey. The lost child. The silent walker. The brave voyager. The grieving son. The curious listener. All of them, looking back. He touched the mirror. And it shimmered. Then cracked. But not from damage. From release. From the center, a crystal rose. Clear as air. Weightless as thought. The 13th gift. The prism of presence. This gift, the tower whispered through the wind, would let him see people not just as they appeared, but as they were. Their burdens. Their hopes. Their masks. And in seeing them clearly, he would learn to see himself. He held it gently. The mirror faded into mist. And a faint glow sparked in the center of the tower. The light had returned. Not as fire. But as understanding. And that was enough. He descended slowly, the spiral path whispering beneath his feet. Back aboard Skjoldr, he placed the prism in his satchel. And looked back. The lighthouse shimmered softly now, its quiet flame newly reborn. Not blinding. Just steady. Enough to say, "You're not alone." Fade into the sound of wind through stone, soft footsteps, and the hum of a memory rekindled. The sky was darker now. Not with clouds, but with a hush that came before wonder. The sea beneath Skjoldr had grown still, like a mirror stretched wide, reflecting every shimmer of the night sky. Eirik sat quietly, his hands resting on the edges of the ship. 13 gifts now. Each one a key, a memory, a story made solid. And then, something streaked across the sky. A star. Falling. Then another. And another. They fell not with noise, but with grace, like fireflies diving into water. And on the horizon, a glow, soft blue, pale gold. An island appeared. No cliffs. No hills. Only smooth, shining sands that seemed to capture the light of every falling star. Skjoldr slowed, then drifted to a gentle stop along the shore. Eirik stepped off and found the ground warm beneath his feet, like sunlight preserved. The stars above continued to fall, each one disappearing just before it touched the earth. But one did not. One star fell slowly. silently. Until it came to rest at the center of the island. Not in flame. Not in fire. But as a figure. A woman, tall, cloaked in silver, her hair glowing with soft starlight. She turned to Eirik and smiled. "You've come far," she said softly. "I follow the flame," he replied. She nodded. "But even flame must rest." He stepped closer. "What is this place?" She turned and gestured around her. "This is where forgotten dreams fall. Hopes never spoken. Wishes never made." Eirik looked at the sky. So many falling stars. So many dreams. "Every heart holds them," she said, "but not all are ready to be born." She reached into the air and caught a falling star in her hands. It did not burn her. It pulsed gently. She handed it to Eirik. The warmth filled his chest. Not like fire, but like longing. Inside the star, he saw visions. His mother's face. His village. A future he hadn't dared to imagine. A quiet life. A cabin by the fjord. Laughter in the snow. The star whispered, "This too can be yours." The 14th gift. The star of what could be. It didn't show destiny. Only possibility. Eirik held it tightly. And wept. Not from sadness. But from hope. The woman in silver smiled. "You are nearly ready," she whispered. He bowed. She faded, rising like mist. And the star nestled gently into the satchel beside the others. As he stepped back onto Skjold, the falling stars slowed. The sea shimmered. And the sky above seemed to hold its breath. Because sometimes, it is not fear that stops us, but the quiet courage to believe something good could happen. Fade into soft starfalls, warm winds, and the hush of a sky holding dreams. The stars remained above, but the sky had changed. It was no longer vast and endless. Now, it curved gently like a great dome, enclosing Eirik in a hush that felt sacred. Skjold glided toward an island so still, it seemed made of silence. Smooth stones led from the shore into a wide valley, ringed by towering cliffs. No wind stirred. No birds called. Only the soft creak of the ship faded behind him as he stepped onto the path. The cliffs ahead opened like great doors. A passage of stone. And beyond, a hall. Not a hall made by men, but by time. Its walls were ancient, carved with runes too old to read. Its pillars glowed faintly, lit by no flame, only memory. Eirik stepped inside. His boots made no sound. Only the rhythm of his breath accompanied him. And then, he heard them. Voices. Soft. So soft, they seemed like the memory of whispers. Not loud. Not clear. But present. They came from the walls. The stone. The air. The hall was not empty. It was full of every voice that had ever walked it. Some cried. Some laughed. Most simply spoke. And Eirik listened. "I failed," said one voice. "I waited too long," whispered another. "I loved," said a third. And another, quietly, "I forgave." The hall didn't judge. It simply held them all. Each voice, a thread in a great tapestry of life. Eirik moved slowly, reverently. At the end of the hall, a pool. Still as glass. Above it, a single crystal hung from a thread of light. He stepped closer. And saw his reflection in the water. But not just one version. All versions. The boy. The wanderer. The son. The seeker. And, the man he was becoming. The crystal glowed. And lowered gently into his hands. The 15th gift. The voice within. It held no power. No flame. No shield. Only a truth, that inside every soul is a voice. Quiet. Waiting. Honest. The hall faded slowly around him, and the voices, one by one, fell silent. But not lost. Only at peace. He stepped out into the moonlight once more, holding the crystal close. And Skjoldr was waiting. As always. He placed the gift in his satchel. And looked back. The cliffs had closed. But he could still feel the voices. They were not meant to be remembered. Only heard. And honored. Fade into soft stone echoes, a faint chorus of whispers, and the breath of stillness itself. The stars had begun to fade. Not from clouds. But from dawn. A faint blush of morning warmed the horizon, soft pinks and golds brushing the sea like the first breath of a new world. Eirik stood aboard Skjoldr, now heavier with gifts, but lighter in spirit. 15 treasures nestled in the satchel by his side. Each one earned not through conquest, but through patience, listening, and courage. And now, he saw it. Far to the north, a shimmer. Not of sunlight. But of flame. Not fire as we know it. Not red or orange. But blue. White. Pure. A mountain rose from the sea, tall and narrow, its peak crowned with flickering light. The North Flame. Ancient. Sacred. Said to burn only for the worthy. Skjoldr approached with reverent stillness. No waves here. Only deep water. Silent and watching. Eirik stepped ashore. The stone beneath his feet hummed. With each step, he felt memories rise in the air like mist. Every place he'd been. Every choice he'd made. The mountain did not challenge him. It welcomed him. He climbed slowly. And at the summit. A throne of stone. Empty. And before it, standing still as carved wood. The guardian. Cloaked in shadow, yet made of light. Neither man nor woman. Neither young nor old. Timeless. The guardian raised a hand. You have gathered the gifts. Eirik nodded. But have you understood them? I think so. The guardian stepped aside. A pedestal rose from the stone. Place them here, they said gently. Eirik opened the satchel. One by one, he placed the gifts. The feather of listening. The coin of trust. The flame of memory. The shell of grief. The stone of strength. The thread of kindness. The bell of echoes. The eye of the storm. The seed of stillness. The ring of return. The pearl of patience. The prism of presence. The star of what could be. The voice within. And finally, his own heart. Not literally. But the truth of it. All that he was. All that he had become. The pedestal glowed. And the north flame answered. It did not roar. It simply grew. Quiet. Pure. Endless. And Eirik knew. This was not a fire to warm the body. It was a fire to guide the soul. The guardian spoke once more. You are not chosen because you were perfect. You are chosen because you remembered what it means to be human. The north flame leapt high, then folded into a single spark. It floated into Eirik's hands. The 16th gift. The light within. He held it close. It did not burn. It belonged. And for the first time, he smiled, not with triumph, but with peace. He turned. Descended the mountain. And Skjoldr waited. Faithful as ever. The sea was calm. The sky open. And the wind, no longer pushed him forward. It welcomed him home. Fade into the soft flicker of distant flame, and the hush of morning waiting patiently at the shore. The sky was full of soft color now. A quiet blue. A whisper of pink along the edges. The stars had faded, but their memory lingered. And the north flame, still flickered within Eirik's heart. Skjoldr moved gently over the water, not with speed, but with purpose. The journey was no longer about seeking. Now, it was about returning. And yet, home would not be as it was. Because he was not as he was. The 16 gifts sat beside him, not heavy, not loud. Just present. Reminders of a voyage made not for riches or fame, but for understanding. He watched the sea. The shape of familiar land slowly appeared on the horizon. Tall pine trees. Snow-dusted rocks. The bay where he had once stood, uncertain. It was still there. Waiting for him. And in the silence, he heard them. The voices of those he had met. The laughing giant. The weaver of wind. The silent tree. The woman of the stars. And the guardian of flame. Each had given something. And now, those gifts would be passed on. Not through words. But through the way Eirik would now live. As Skjoldr touched the shore, he stepped down onto earth that remembered him. Birdsong rose in the air. A soft wind stirred the trees. And the village came into view, small, humble, alive. Faces looked up. Some remembered. Some did not. But all of them saw. Not the same Eirik who had left. But someone changed by the road. He did not speak much. He did not need to. He smiled. He listened. He helped build a new roof. He fixed nets. He sat with the old and played with the young. At night, he would sit by the fire. And quietly place one of the gifts on the table. Sometimes the feather of listening. Sometimes the seed of stillness. He never explained them. He let people find their own meaning. And slowly, the village grew warmer. Not in temperature. In spirit. And Eirik? He did not need another voyage. Because he had learned. The greatest journeys are not those that take us far. But those that bring us closer to ourselves. The north flame still flickered inside him. And on calm nights, when the stars whispered above the fjord, he would step outside. And listen. To the wind. To the waves. To the quiet voice within. And he would whisper back. I remember. I am home. Fade into soft waves, the breath of wind through pine, and the final hush of a tale come full circle.